As we look at Daniel chapter 11, we must remember that Daniel chapters 10, 11, and 12 are one continuous vision. We will therefore pick up from the end of Daniel chapter 10 and move right into Daniel chapter 11. And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than them all. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. The truth has to do with the scripture of truth spoken of in Daniel chapter 10, verse 21. It is the truth concerning the world kingdoms. 3 more kings will arise out of Persia after King Cyrus. The 4th king is commonly identified with the Ahasuerus of Esther, who was fabulously rich, wealthy, and self-confident. History tells us how he amassed an army of 1 million men and a navy of 1,200 ships, declaring war on Greece, and suffered a humiliating defeat. There were certainly more than 4 Persian kings, but they had no concern with the people of God. However, those 4 did, either in hindering or in helping the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. Verse 3 jumps right over to a mighty king that arose with great dominion. History confirms that this king is Alexander the Great from the Grecian Empire. It reads, that a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided towards the 4 winds of heaven, but not among his posterity, nor according to his dominion with which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be uprooted, even for others besides these. To really appreciate these prophetic words, we must see the progressive revelation given to Daniel concerning the Grecian Empire. In Daniel chapter 7, the kingdom of Greece was seen in the vision of the leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings of a bird. Take note of the number 4. Then, in Daniel chapter 8, we saw how the goat with a large horn, Greece, would overpower and trample the ram, Persia. The goat grew very great, and when he became strong, the large horn was broken, and in its place 4 notable horns came up. Thus, when we put Daniel chapters 7, 8, and 11 right next to each other, history confirms how Alexander the Great died at the height of his power, and his kingdom was broken up and divided towards the 4 winds of heaven, but not according to his posterity. The Grecian Empire would never be the same, for it was uprooted and divided among Alexander's 4 leading generals, but not his descendants. And so we see how the 4 generals correspond to the 4 heads on the leopard kingdom in chapter 7, the 4 horns that came out of the large horn of the goat in chapter 8, and the kingdom broken and divided towards the 4 winds of heaven in chapter 11. We now move to the conflicts between the king of the south and the king of the north, found from verse 5 right through to the rest of the chapter. As already noted, after Alexander's death, his kingdom was divided among his 4 generals, namely Ptolemy, Seleucus, Lysimachus, and Cassander. Ptolemy took Egypt, Libya, Arabia, and Palestine and the southern part. Seleucus took Syria and the eastern part. Lysimachus took Thrace, parts of Asia and the northern part, and Cassander took Macedonia and the western part. It was out of this division that began 2 dynasties, namely the king of the south and the king of the north. The king of the south is undoubtedly the king of Egypt, which was obtained by Ptolemy and was ruled under a succession of kings known as the Ptolemies. The king of the north is the king of Syria, which was obtained by Seleucus and ruled under a succession of kings known as the Seleucidae. History shows us that Seleucus had won most of the territory belonging to the other 2 divisions of the Grecian Empire, that of Lysimachus and Cassander. The nation of Israel was caught right in the middle of the conflicts between Egypt and Syria, and was at times in the possession of the kings of Egypt, the king of the south, and sometimes of the kings of Syria, the king of the north. The reason that Daniel sees these as north and south was because Palestine was the central point of God's dealings on the earth, Syria being the north and Egypt being the south. Palestine became the battleground between these ongoing conflicts that arose out of the Grecian Empire. It is out of the king of the north, also known as the Seleucid Empire, or Syria, that a vile person would arise. A careful read of verses 15 to 21 tells us so, showing us the succession of the kings of the north. Verse 15 begins with the king of the north. Verses 16 to 19 tell us the things he does. Verse 20 goes on to say that in place of the king of the north, another king shall arise who will impose taxes on the glorious land. And verse 21 tells us that in his place arises a vile person who would seize the kingdom by intrigue. So in Daniel 8, we know that a little horn will come out of one of the four horns. And now, Daniel chapter 11 tells us exactly which of the four horns the little horn comes out of. It is out of Syria, the king of the north, the Seleucid Empire. In other words, the vile person of chapter 11 is the little horn of chapter 8. When we look at history, it is agreed by many that the fulfillment of the vile person of chapter 11 and the little horn of chapter 8 are seen in the person of Antiochus Epiphanes of the Syrian kingdom, the king of the north. It is Antiochus Epiphanes, the king of the north, who came from the Seleucid Empire, or Syria, that forbade the burnt offerings and sacrifices, profaned the Sabbath and festivals, defiled the sanctuary and the priest, and had swine and other unclean animals sacrificed. He arrogantly entered the sanctuary and took the furniture and the utensils of the temple into his own land. He placed an image of Jupiter Olympus, a Roman god, in the Holy of Holies, and this was the abomination of desolation in the sight of God and the faithful Jews. He shed much blood, tore to pieces, and burnt the books of the law that were found, and made a decree that those who would not adhere to his laws would be put to death. He caused many Jews to forsake their faith and to sacrifice idols and to profane the Sabbath. Although Antiochus Epiphanes historically fulfills these prophecies in part, he is but a type of the end times Antichrist. The key in understanding this is the time element mentioned throughout the book of Daniel, in line with the book of Revelation. It is therefore crucial to keep in view the historical fulfillment, the time element, and the prophecies given to Daniel in the light of the book of Revelation, the things Jesus said in the Gospels, and the epistles of the New Testament. When all the parts of the puzzle are laid out and brought in together, we start to see the big picture. As we go from chapter to chapter, the progressive revelation in relation to the world kingdoms given to Daniel becomes clearer and clearer, moving from historical fulfillment to prophetic events relating to the end times. From verses 21 onwards, we start to see an emphasis on the king of the north. Verse 21 reveals the king of the north as a vile person, and verse 36, the king that does according to his own will. Well, why is that? As we look deeper, we will see that though they may have historical fulfillment, they ultimately point to the final Antichrist. They reveal to us the nature and the characteristics of the spirit of Antichrist. When we compare the little horn of Daniel chapter 7, the little horn of Daniel chapter 8, the vile person and the willful king of Daniel chapter 11, together with the beast of Revelation chapter 13, we find a striking parallel. In Daniel chapter 7, we have the terrible beast, Rome, that has 10 horns, and out of the 10 arose a little horn, and uprooted 3 other horns. This little horn shall speak pompous words against the Most High, intent to change times and law, persecute and prevail against the saints for a time, times, and half a time. In Daniel chapter 8, we have a little horn that comes out of one of the 4 notable horns which came in the place of the large horn that was broken, the kingdom of Greece. This little horn is seen to cast down some of the host, some of the stars, the place of God's sanctuary, and the truth to the ground. He is also seen to oppose and take away the daily sacrifices. In Daniel chapter 11, the vile person that comes out of the king of the north defiles the sanctuary fortress, takes away the daily sacrifices, places the abomination of desolation, and does wickedly against the covenant, and corrupts with flattery. And now in verse 36, we move on to the willful king of the north, who does according to his own will. This final passage seems to leap over to the time of the end, and the final king of the Syrian division of the Grecian Empire, and the final manifestation of the king of the north, who is an absolute dictator and autocrat. Many see behind this willful king a prophecy of the final Antichrist. When we get to Daniel chapter 12, which is really a continuation of Daniel chapter 11 about the time of the end, we will find that in Daniel chapter 12, the word time appears 10 times, clearly and plainly describing the same time element of Daniel chapter 11, the time of the end. Chapter 12 will ultimately bring the abomination of desolation and the time element together, as it clearly defines what the end of time is. The willful king who points to the Antichrist as seen in verse 45 shall come to his end, and no one will help him. Yes, Jesus, the stone cut without hands, will smite the great image of the world kingdoms. Jesus, the Son of Man, will destroy the beastly kingdoms. Jesus, the Prince of Princes, will break the little horn without human means. Behold, when the last trumpet shall finish sounding, the kingdom of this world will become the kingdom of our God and of his Christ. Let us come to Jesus as living stones and as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to God, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ, which is our reasonable worship and service.